Excellent. So welcome everyone. Welcome to this latest episode in the Data Transformation series from the Digital Transformation Lab in UCC. Delighted to have Jordan Morrow with us today. I've followed Jordan for a long time. I think he's an absolute giant when it comes to data literacy, strategy, data culture. So I'm really looking forward to this. And of course, my co-host today is Anne-Marie Smith. Anne-Marie, I'll maybe let you say hi first, and we'll let Jordan then maybe say a few words about himself.
Okay, thank you, Patty. It's always a pleasure to be part of the Digital Transformation Lab interviews and anything else to do with this fantastic lab. As the editor of the datamanagementu.com journal, I'm just thrilled to be injecting some data aspects into digital transformation with my good friend, Patty O'Reilly. Now, Jordan, over to you.
Oh, man. Well, to introduce myself, Jordan Morrow. Current position that I'm in as Vice President and Head of Data and Analytics for an organization called Brainstorm. But my passion, as Patty said, it is data literacy. I help pioneer and invent that whole field. I've spoken to companies all over the world, traveled all over the world with it, and I haven't spoken in 2 continents. South America, I've worked with companies there or whatever, but I haven't spoken in presence in South America. So anybody who listens from there, you want to invite me, let's do it. The other one that I've got to find a way to do is I've got to speak at some point on Antarctica. I've got to find a way to hold some sort of data something down there. But I love it. You know, I've got 2 nicknames in the industry. One that not sure how I feel about, which is the Godfather of Data Literacy. Sometimes I'm good with it, sometimes not. And then the second one, that one was given to me. I had someone say, "You got to love it when someone calls themselves the Godfather." I mean, no, I did not do that. And then the other one was, and I don't remember where this one came from, whether I said it once and then people latched on, but Chief Nerd Officer, and I am more than happy to be the Chief Nerd Officer. That one I'm totally good with.
Yeah, and of course as well, Jordan, you have a book out. I've read it. Be data literate. Again, people I'm sure will be very interested in following up on this after this session. So I know you haven't maybe mentioned it there, but I'll mention it. Anne-Marie, you're always great at asking those initial hard questions. I'll let you take it away from here.
Actually, this is going to be an easy question to start. Jordan, why don't you tell us about your background and what led you briefly to this current position, your current status in data?
Yeah, so
how did you become the Godfather of Data Literacy?
Well, it's interesting. I started my career. My white hair, you can't see it as much in the camera, but it's there, and I don't like having hair, so we can't see it up here either. But I've been in my career now for years, and started at American Express, worked there, for over 8.5 years. The last position that I had there, I ran a business intelligence group for their U.S. consumer card. And at one point I was told, and it was kind of funny, you're going to do all the training on this. So I'm in Utah, I would travel to New York to headquarters, train people on what we were building. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if we taught them how to do like basic statistics, taught them how to actually use data versus a tool. That wasn't necessarily how I was thinking of it, but I'm like, let's teach them. This would be cool. Because at the time when you're democratizing data and you're giving data to people, I think the standard, and in a lot of cases today, the standard is the same. You teach them the tool, but teaching someone the tool does not empower them or teach them how to effectively use data. So I came up with this learning plan. I built a plan, like kind of a high level or foundation or whatever, presented it to my EVP, and she just flat said, no, they're not ready for it, maybe in the future. I didn't realize at the time, right, I'm stumbling upon data literacy, which essentially is teaching people who are not data and analytics professionals to be confident and do stuff with data. And so eventually, American Express wanted to change my role to database administration or something. I didn't want that. And Click, the data and analytics vendor, had a job open that was analytics curriculum manager. And I went for it. Basically, in the first interview, was told that this is yours. Like, you're my guy. But while some people, or probably a lot of people, don't know this part of the story, though, during the hiring process, they dropped the ball. At the time, I didn't know why. Unfortunately, the recruiter had gotten in a car accident. But we didn't hear things. And my wife and I were like, we're done pursuing this. Like, if they're not gonna, and eventually they found out or whatever, got it. And then I started, and then it was June 2016. That's the beginning of my work at Click, where I became, I was going to say the Godfather, but the global head of data literacy. And then it was February, March 2017, Gartner released their article. I talked to Gartner in June or July. I think that they were a little surprised that somebody had already been working on it for a while, and then kind of the rest is history. Wrote the book on it, and I don't know if you two know this, but book number 2 actually comes out in August, and it's called Be Data Driven, which was one of those big buzzwords that came out during the pandemic. And I think that's what spurred me on to write book number 2, and book number 3 publishes next year. So it's, you know, it's, if you had asked me when I started, my goodness, no, I've traveled the world, done all this. I'm just super lucky. And someone has asked me, or I've been asked, how'd you figure? I didn't figure anything out. I think people need to realize that I had an idea, and thankfully at the same time there was kind of this convergence of that data literacy idea blowing up. We didn't even call it just data literacy when we started it. We called it like 3 different names. So it's cool. I love it. And I truly am as nerdy as they come. So to me, this is a party. Let's talk about such a fun topic and dig in, answer questions, see what we get.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question, and then I'm going to throw it to Patty, okay?
Yep.
Data literacy, as you've defined it, is helping people understand data, how to work with data, how to make decisions and improve operations based on data. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. How do you see what I do in data strategy, data governance, metadata management, data quality, etc., play into the capabilities of a data literate organization and a data literate professional?
It's a great question, because to your point, there's 2 sides of the same coin when it comes to data and analytics, if you will. And let's say that coin is the data strategy coin. On one side, you're going to have your data and analytics professionals doing the things that you do, talking to governance, ethics, data science, the actual analytical work, the deep work. Think of that same coin. The other side of it is the data literacy side, where people don't necessarily need to know all the technical and the know-how and have to do it themselves, but they should be able to communicate and have conversations and understanding around those things. So a part of the things that you're talking about, like, let's go at that holistic data strategy. A part of it is employees better know what's going on. It doesn't mean they need to know the ins and outs, the technical. They don't need to do the statistics, the algorithms, the coding, but can they ask good questions that then those data professionals who do know how to do that can put to work, so that you have a holistic culture working together with data. So data literacy should be, when we talk about that word understanding, it's understanding what is data governance, what can I have access to, what can't I have access to, data ethics, what is appropriate use and things like that. My personal biases, do I have confirmation bias in the analysis or the data that I have chosen because it suited my argument? Can I ask good questions of the data? Do I know how to find insight in the data, right? There's 4 levels of analytics. Most organizations and people do level 1, descriptive. They stink at the rest of them. And if we can empower all users to ask good questions, to move beyond the descriptive analytic and get into why something's occurring, then there's the governance and the work and the strategy and the implementation. So they're the same coin, they're just different sides. The majority, the analogy that I use, if you think about a 10,000 person organization, 1 to 200 people might be those true hardcore data and analytics professionals. So 9,800 are not. They better know how to work with those 100 to 200 people. They better know how to have conversations and dialogue. The flip of that is the data and analytics professionals need data literacy in the communication side. Can they simplify what they're doing so that the mass of people can understand it? So it's such a cultural working together and understanding and finding out the skills that you need to help the holistic data strategy to be successful.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's, I'm fairly sure it's in the book as well, Jordan. Very neatly, you call out sort of 4 characteristics of the data literacy, and then you use that to define data literacy. Can you tell maybe the audience a little bit about those 4 elements?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with a counter to it, if I could. The one thing that you don't find in the definition of data literacy is data science. And
right.
because that is such a buzzworthy, hyped up thing, it became such the sexy thing. Sexiest job of the 21st century, Harvard said, and I think October 2012 is the data scientist or whatever. So we gotta remove that out. The 4 characteristics are the ability to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with data. So it's not necessarily like the most important one to me is the ability to read, understand, and interpret data. Because if you can't read it and understand it, how can you work with it, analyze it, and communicate with it effectively? Working with it is going to vary. For you, it might be, if you're a data professional, you're building the data visualizations, you're doing the coding, you're doing the statistics, maybe you're a data engineer architecting the back end. But for someone else, it might be receiving that data visualization from someone and just knowing how to filter through it to dig deeper than the surface level dashboard that sits there. Analyzing it. There are the 4 levels of analytics, but it's really, can you dig in, find trends and patterns? Can you find things, the insight within it? And then if reading it's the most important, I call communicating with data that secret sauce, because if we can't communicate effectively with data or communicate our analysis across, imagine, Patty, that you created the greatest insight in the world, but you can't communicate it effectively to the audience. So they don't know what to do with it, and it just goes by the wayside. And that goes to, like, if someone asks me, does a data scientist have a part with data literacy? Yes, because they're trained on the technical, but where they might not have been trained is how to communicate effectively to the audience so that people understand. So we got to teach them communication. So those are the 4 characteristics. Again, data science is not in there. You didn't see machine learning in there. What I would say, though, is you need to have maybe a baseline understanding of those, just so you understand the operation of it, right? Just how does like machine learning? Oh, you might not need to know the ins and outs, but what if it spits out an insight? Can you then do something with it? So there's just so much to it, but not so much, if that makes sense. It's simple. It's not being technical. It's not doing these massive things. It's, can I read it? Can I work with it? Can I communicate? Can I understand or analyze? And developing your skills more and more in that space.
Yeah.
One thing that I've noticed is that many professionals in a whole slew of professions don't even know that they need to base their operations and their decisions on data.
Yep. Absolutely.
Why do I need data? I just know.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too that I like to teach with data literacy, is because I think there's a fear, right? Like, there's been multiple posts on this lately on LinkedIn. I did one, a colleague or friend, Kyle Winterbottom, did one about the nuances of definitions. Like, some people don't like data driven, they don't like data informed, or they like data informed, not data driven. It's like, forget the nuance. Let's forget that. The other day, there's someone tagged me in one that said, we got to get rid of that term data literacy. I'm like, yeah, you're not going to. That is so well established. Because, like, well, I don't want to be called data illiterate. Well, it's like, well, there's context. I teach people they're more data literate than they know. You have to read your gas gauge. You're studying the weather to figure out what to do. That's data to use to make a decision, right? And I think there is a fear that people like data is going to take over, or my gut feel matters more. So what I teach is it's a combination of your gut feel, what you think, your experience with the data. Sometimes the data needs to override your personal thoughts, 100%. And sometimes, you know what? The data might not understand a nuance or a seasonality that is at play. So your human element comes in to supersede a little bit there. But I think there's a fear, right? There's a fear of the unknown, and hopefully data literacy helps remove that fear. That data and analytics are tools, right? Right now, I believe we're in Microsoft Teams. That's a tool for the successful recording of this conversation. We have Microsoft Outlook or Gmail. Those are emails to communicate. We have PowerPoint, Tableau. Think of data and analytics as another tool in your tool belt to do your job more effectively. Remove the stigma, remove the fear, the intimidation of what's going to occur, and use it as a tool to say, this is more information coming to me. Have I been wrong in the past? Possibly. And I think that's another thing, is we have to open our minds to full discourse of different things that are coming to us. We have to be okay with things that are going to go counter to our thoughts and opinions. That's something I think is absolutely very rare in the world right now. Like, it's just people are not opening their minds to other sides of a story. And we have to have those type of things with data, those conversations with ourselves and in our jobs, right? We have to be able to say, we've ran this marketing campaign the same way for a year. maybe that's not the right way. I'm going to go ask Jordan, will you analyze this? And if Jordan comes back and says, the data shows you've run it wrong, well, not wrong, I don't like that word. We didn't fail. We're going to learn that 50% of this was good. The other 50%, let's modify it here. Follow it for a while. We find that 20% of that wasn't good. Let's modify that here. Data and analytics is learning fast, and so we've got to remove stigmas, get rid of our fear, become more data literate, so that there is a comfort in using data in our decisions.
And I was very interested in the book as well, Jordan. You mentioned how maybe some of the more traditional definitions of data literacy includes argues with data, and I know sort of from my own background, I probably do believe that's a very important skill, especially prescriptive analytics, where you've data that can be conflicting, this I suppose ability of people to be able to make arguments about what we should do into the future. Was there a reason you said, look, I'll leave that out, I'll put the word communication in instead, or do you see them as being sort of much of a muchness?
Yes, we made a conscious choice, and it might have been because, like, think of that term, data storyteller was bigger. Like, I think the argue with confused people more, because there were two sides of it. The side you just mentioned, which is how I interpreted it, I think, from the beginning. You put a position forward and you back it up with data arguments, right, to suit it. But people were confused or said, well, does this mean, or they said, are you arguing with your data, meaning critically thinking on it and stuff? Both of those are wonderful, right? And so we made a conscious decision to change it. I think communicate with data. It's more widespread or more easily understood, maybe. But what I would say is, when I teach people, like, how do you get started with this? That questioning or arguing with data to dissect it better is one of the first things you need to get better at. And that's curiosity and critical thinking. Can you dig into it well, to question it, to understand it, to find out what's happening, what's not happening? That matters big time. And then communicate with it or argue with it, like you're talking about. Can I put a position forward, communicate it with 3 to 5 data points? And I think that's the other side of communicate and argue with we have to get good at, is forget the flowery language. Here's the position, 3 to 5 bullet points, simplified. That's what my argument is. And then we have to come together, make decisions, and go. And I think data and analytics empowers that speed, that velocity, if you're doing it right with the right culture, the right data strategy, because we've got this analysis, we feel good about it, we're running with it, we'll evaluate in 6 months. Look, boom, we found this wasn't working, go, boom, go. And you have to back it up, you have to argue, you have to communicate, and all those things together.
Jordan, a little while ago, you mentioned that people are often afraid of data. Why do you think that's the case? I'm a nerd. I love data.
So for me, it's like, go back to school. Like, mathematics is my favorite subject. How many people choose math as their favorite subject? You know what I mean? And statistics, how many people want to? I think that there's this fear or misunderstanding that when we say data and analytics, we're talking all the complex. We're talking about coding. Do I have to learn R or Python or SQL? Oh my gosh, artificial intelligence and computer science. So I think there's a misunderstanding. This is why data literacy, one of the many reasons probably that it is so important, is it hopefully is removing that misunderstanding. Because for so long you're thinking that sexiest job of the 21st century, data scientist. Well, if you're doing true data science work and experimenting on data, 99% of people don't want to do that. Like, for us, it's just common language, it's cool and this, like that. For a lot of people, if you went into marketing or other risk has data and stuff, but if you've chosen a field that you like, that wasn't data science or it wasn't this complex, then, oh my gosh, now do I have to go back to school to be a data scientist or statistics? And the answer, of course, is no, you don't have to go back to school. But I think that there is this need with data literacy, or just a need in data and analytics, to remove this misunderstanding that it's complicated, that it's complex, that you have to learn the technical. Let's just stick with the simplicity of it and empower you with data literacy so you can be a vital part of your organization's business strategy. Because of course the data strategy should be supporting that business strategy.
And I think you're very, very provocative, and I think you're dead on, the money when you've a call to action, looking into the eyes of organizations. You're saying, Jordan, we don't need another data scientist, we need a data strategy. But at the same time, you say that most organizations do not have effective data strategies. What's happening? What's going wrong?
I actually think COVID helped this, to be perfectly honest. I think that you have a lot of leaders who don't have that data and analytics professional background, but they know they needed to use data, right? We're seeing the advent of chief data officers and chief analytics officers, which is wonderful. They're needed. But prior to that, so the 4 or 5 years ago, or whatever it was, people knew they needed to use data. But I think a lot of times the strategy became a tool. A tool is not a strategy. A tool is to empower a strategy, right? So they're investing all this money and they're trying to get data driven. They're trying to use data. They're trying to have a data strategy. But the problem is they didn't know how. And that, I think, is because you had non-data professionals trying to lead that charge. And we're starting to see that flip. There's buy-in. There's like all of these things occurring. COVID sped that up. So prior to the pandemic, when shutdowns occurred, I worked remotely. My entire time at Click, I was remote. And a little bit before that at American Express. It wasn't technically remote, but we didn't go into the office because the people I supported was in New York, or were in New York. But so prior to the pandemic, I was on the road 1 to 4 times a month. And when the shutdowns occurred, travel shuts down, you're sitting there like, man, my calendar is going to open up. But guess what happened? The opposite. It got busier. And anecdotally, the reason I think that happened is call the data literacy guy, because they could not be data driven. These organizations wanted to be. And if you think about the pandemic, being able to use data to make decisions during an uneasy time should be empowering, but they couldn't do it. So let's call Jordan up, get Jordan on the phone. What do we need to do? And I think that COVID hopefully illuminated and opened the eyes of organizations that you just can't buy tools. You just can't put the tools into the hands of people and think you're getting data and analytics success. That's a very poor strategy. And so hopefully we're starting to see better data strategies come along that tie to the business strategy or to business outcomes. That's what we need.
I have 3 questions to ask, and they're all related. That's why I'm pausing. So I'm going to choose one and see if you answer the other 2, just because you probably will. What's the most pressing data-related issue that you see organizations facing right now?
Oh, man. So there's a myriad of things. I would honestly say, and it's probably one of 2. It's one, the data literacy of the organization. For example, the company I got brought to, I didn't apply to the job. I had a friend who's a friend with like 2 of the owners say, I don't know if Jordan's looking, but he's the guy to talk to. And it worked out that it was a fit for me, but they want to be data driven. They just don't know how. And so both of the solutions to it are this. They need a good data strategy, which I'm working on, but they also need good data literacy within it. They're using data, but you can see the gaps or the issues or the holes that are there. So those gaps and holes are on the data literacy side, but there's also gaps and holes on the architecture, the engineering on the back end. So I think there's 2 answers to it. And unfortunately, I wish I could give that one crystal ball look at it, but it is a good holistic data strategy that supports the business strategy. And it's a good data literacy strategy that empowers people to use data effectively. Because I don't care how clean your data is. If people don't know how to use it, you spend a lot of money to clean it, but it's not being used effectively. And you could empower everybody to use data, but if you don't have a good data strategy on what they need to do with that data, are they doing the right thing? And so those would be the 2 there, but underpinning it all, and this just popped into my head, is the #1 roadblock to data and analytics success, the culture of the organization. If the culture is not ready to do this, you better get them on board, because if not, you might put an amazing data literacy strategy in place, an amazing data strategy in place. No one wants to do it. So at that point, where are you? So call that the trifecta: culture, strategy, and data literacy.
You actually did what I thought you might do. And I want to ask a follow-up question about the culture.
Yeah.
How do you change that culture? Because as a consultant, I see it all the time, that the culture is not ready. A few select people or roles in the organization, like raisins and tapioca pudding, know they need this, but the rest of the tapioca pudding, the culture is just, ugh, it's not there.
Yeah.
How do you change it?
So it's such an interesting one. I think for me, the way I help organizations or have helped them do it is kind of maybe two or threefold if I think it that way. It's number one, you have to establish the why behind these things. People need to understand, like you can't send an email that says, we're doing data literacy training, you have mandatory training. How many people like getting an email that says you have mandatory training, right? Not very many, right? You just click through it and then you're done, you checked it off your box. So start with the awareness. Start by having webinars. Like this is something I've done for organizations or companies or whatever it's been. Bring Jordan in to speak for 45 minutes to 60 minutes on why data literacy matters. Not talking about a program, not talking about change management, but in putting in their mind like that true definition. We're not trying to make you technical. We're not trying to do this, but we do want you to be comfortable using data. You need good communication plans. And for me, it's not about changing an organization's culture. It's about evolving it to where they start to see data as a tool in their tool belt, that they don't have to become some proficient Python coder, but they need to get good at asking questions. And then hopefully what we do is we teach them that this will make their careers better. The better you are with data right now, the better your career could be, I would say, because of all the needs that are out there for data. So it's these different processes versus just putting a plan in place and telling people to go do it. And when I start with those, I think starting with those has a more efficacious way of bringing about a culture that understands why data is being used, understands we're not trying to train them to be data scientists, but that hopefully they understand we're trying to empower them with data just to be more successful.
Thank you. Patty.
Yeah, and I think the book has a fantastic framework. I think it's the roadmap for culture change. I think, Jordan, and for the audience, it is about those steps, those setting the outcome, then creating the strategy. Third is arming the employees. Four then is closing that skill gap and really nurturing that culture. And I love the idea then that, and I agree, it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to change culture, but you can grow culture. And I love the way you emphasize that. Jordan, this is a bit of a left field question, but I'm going to go there anyway because I was intrigued. I do like history, and I was intrigued in the book, where you referenced the London cholera epidemic on a number of occasions to build examples. What is it about that example that really resonated with you, and what can we learn from it?
I think it's the easiness of it, right? It's easy to understand, the simplicity of it, right? When we think, and maybe I'm going with a left field answer here, when we think about data and analytics, I think sometimes we think of it's complex, right? Mm-hmm. That it's, the thing that Jon Snow cholera example, and I love that it's Jon Snow because it's not Game of Thrones here, it's cholera, but maybe a certain time period that seems similar, but I think there was an assumption or a thought process that it could have been diapers in the water system, right? But visualizing the data, and maybe that's one of the key things when we talk about simplicity. There is so much data in the world. Can we visualize it in a way with, I think out of our senses, visualization is the most powerful, right? And so can we visualize and take billions of data points or millions of data points, put it into a visualization and say, just look at it. And when you look at that cholera example, look at where the points are. And they're surrounding, right, the water valve or whatever. If I remember right, that's what's happening. You look at it and there it is. It's like, okay, can we dig into this more? And that's that curiosity that I want people to do, right? It's look here in the visualization, there's a pattern, there is something. Can I question this more? That doesn't take coding skills. Maybe it takes knowing who people that code are, but hey, so-and-so, I saw this. Can you dig into this a little bit for me? So there's your culture working together. You don't have to be technical and all that. I think the simplicity of a visualization helps. It's not the solution though. Let me point that out too. Like, Unfortunately, in data and analytics, we get caught around buzzwords and hype. Data visualization became one of those, right? Where I think people saw data visualization as the end all be all. It's not the end all be all. It is a part of the process, right? You could visualize what was happening and being like, oh, there it is. It's all surrounded there, and stop. That's descriptive analytics. You didn't solve anything per se, or you didn't find out why. Instead, you move to diagnostic analytics where you find the insight. Okay, we dug into this area in the cholera example, and we found that the idea around diapers was it, right? The baby waste or whatever causing a cholera outbreak. Okay, so let's solve that. And so don't think of data visualization as an end all, but it is a part of the puzzle that can empower us to make better decisions.
Yeah, and I think it ties in really nicely with your 3 C's, as you're calling out there, Jordan, though, the curiosity, the creativity. But John Snow would be known for that critical thinking. And I also, maybe to come back to an earlier point, I think what he still had to do was, though, communicate and build that argument, because most people at the time thought it was airborne, where he was saying, no, it isn't. Look at patterns. I really, really like that. And Marie?
Challenges for an organization that's accustomed to gut feel answers for operations and decisions. How do you address getting them to really accept the fact that they're collecting a lot of data, but they're not using it appropriately?
Let's go with maybe 1 or 2 answers. Well, we'll go with two answers to this. Number 1, create a library of proof of concept, right? If you're a data professional or you're trying to lead a data literacy journey, create 4 or 5 examples where data is used as a part of the process to make a decision, and then show the success that came from it. Because when you have doubters, but like it doesn't work, you'd be like, well, let me show you these 4 or 5 examples that we have done, we've proven it out. And it's not that we're using data to do the whole thing. There were 8 steps here, and data was steps 2, 4, and 6. And okay, the rest of it is your gut feel maybe, or different things that are occurring. So that proof of concept library. And then number 2 is get the doubters involved in a data project. And sometimes that might mean without them even knowing that they're a part of a data project. But don't be deceitful. We don't want to deceive them, because then they might even get more mad. But get the doubters involved and say, look, I'm working on this project. I've got the data here, but you know what? I need your expertise. I need you to be a part of this. Make them feel a part of it. And then at the end, when they see success from the project or whatever comes about from it, you say, look, we used your expertise. We used the data I found here, and we came to this. Had I just used the data, I would have missed out on you. But had I just used you, we would have missed out on this. That's almost the same as number 1, but in the sense they're now a part of the project. And so those are ways of illuminating the reality that data can do something for you. If we just tell them you're going to use this, you need to use this, come on, we're not going to get them on board or smiling with us, if you will, that was the right thing.
Thank you.
And I love the question, and I love the answer. And I think trust is really important. I think that also what you explained builds that trust, whether you're the CDO coming into a new company, or it's trying to, I suppose, to get across the fact that people can trust their own data. I think all that is important, Jordan. Jordan, I was really, really fascinated. I was listening to something, I think it was probably a podcast you were involved in, and you pulled out the air this example that maybe we should be looking at wisdom strategies rather than data strategies. And I found it fascinating. I think it was referring maybe to work you're doing in the UN, etc. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think if I remember right, I'm actually pulling it up here. Like it's, if I remember right, I do believe it was the UN, because that's how they were defining something. And I thought, you know what, that's a good thing. There's a data strategy. But data is just data, right? It just sits here. It needs something to bring it to life, and that's analytics. Analytics brings it to life. But I can bring something to life that does nothing to change decision making. It has nothing to do with a business strategy. So if I'm going to define wisdom here, we want to take it from utilizing data and analytics to provide me insight and wisdom so that I can make a smarter decision. Right? We can't just build pretty data visualizations. We can't just do these different things. They need to be tied to something. And when we tie to them effectively to a decision, It doesn't mean that decision is going to work all the time. Let's also make that perfectly clear. That's also wisdom, is that we understand it's 70% chance of happening. That means 30 out of 100, it's not going to. We might fall in that boat. So we're going to learn fast. Forget the term fail fast. People say that, but they don't believe it. We're going to do learn fast. So, you know what? It didn't get us all the way there, but we can learn from it. That's wisdom. That's applying the data and analytics to a decision, but understanding outcomes, understanding unexpected outcomes, understanding the iterative approach to this. And that's what we should be tying this to. I love the idea of saying data and wisdom strategy. I think the term data should be attached there somewhere so that people understand data as a part of it. But maybe using a term like data and wisdom strategy helps people to understand the human element is still there, because wisdom sounds like it's a human thing, right? And so that, to me, that's those golden nuggets, is can we truly use data to just do some pretty amazing and cool things, combining it with our thoughts and everything like that.
Powerful. And I love the idea, like data is static probably in nature, whereas you're talking about let's get it up and working, whereby we're making better decisions, and that's that wisdom part. I'm just conscious of time, guys, and so, but I'm still, Anne-Marie, I'm going to hand over to you. Maybe you've a final question you'd like to ask Jordan before we start to wrap it up.
One last question, Jordan. This is the Irish Digital Transformation Lab. Okay, I'm from New Jersey, you're in Utah. We have one Irish representative here, Paddy. But digital transformation, I think, involves a lot of what you've been talking about. The ability to work with data, the ability to get from data through information to possibly wisdom, and the ability to apply design thinking to this process. If you were to summarize what you're doing in the context of digital transformation, how would you do that briefly?
Oh man, look at it this way. From a digital transformation and data transformation, it is about empowering people and organizations to make better decisions. I mean, that is a simplified way of tying a lot of technical, a lot of non-technical, a lot of digital, a lot of data to say, look, in the end, what we want to do is empower you as a person and your organization in your personal life. Trust me, being more data literate and making smarter decisions will empower you in your personal life, and your career to projections and stuff. Plus, it helps a business succeed with data. But that is the simplified way of looking at it. It is remove all the hype, remove everything else. What are we trying to do through digital transformation and data transformation? We want to empower people to make smarter decisions. And if we do that, then absolutely. Look at the power that can come from it. Hopefully that was a good answer for that.
Yes, thank you.
You bet.
And Paddy, you want to take us to the conclusion and wrap it up, unless you have more questions to ask?
No, I'm intrigued by it, because I think that could be the third book that Jordan's talking about, which is to move beyond critical thinking to abductive thinking, to what might, and being able to look into the future. So use that reservoir of data, mobilize it in order to create better future. So we'll put that little idea into Jordan's.
Let's just say that I'm starting to write book 3. Paddy, you might get a nice credit in there somewhere, because it's like you're exactly right. The third book is how to actually use analytics in that transformation, and the end of that has to be how do you make a decision, right? And so yeah.
Cool. We'll be looking forward to it. Look, Jordan, I'm going to leave it to you if there's any final nuggets you want to give to the audience, and then we'll start to wrap it up. So is there any message that you feel maybe we haven't conveyed so far you'd like to convey, or maybe just like to summarize some of what we've been speaking about?
Yeah, 2 things I'm fond of saying. Number 1 is not everyone needs to be a data scientist, but we need to be data literate. So remove any fear from your mind that we're trying to turn you into that technical person. And then number 2, the world needs more data skeptics, not data cynics. The world is doing a good job of data cynicism. Right? People will say, I don't trust data. It's not data you don't trust. Data is just data. It's the use of data that you don't trust. And we should be data skeptical. That doesn't mean that the data presented to us isn't 100% accurate, but we can question it. And I think that's a part of a culture of an organization. Are you comfortable questioning your CEO? Because if not, make the culture be okay with that. So be a data skeptic and be data literate. Those would be the final 2 things right there.
Lovely.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
Yeah, great summary. Also, just a reminder, Jordan, of that first book, Be Data Literate. I'm sure the audience here may be interested in that. I would recommend it. I think it's a great read. Yeah. So, Jordan, other than that book, where can people find out more about you and what you do? Where do you tend to hang around?
LinkedIn, right? I'm pretty open on there. I post a lot on there, and just do that and post a lot. There are times when I go quiet for a bit, need a break, and then there are times I'm posting 3 to 5 times a week. So maybe post a lot isn't the right way to say it, but I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm an open book. Connect with me if you want mentoring help, if you need resources to get going, connect with me. Follow me. I do, like I said, I hope to get about 2 to 3 posts a week, mainly on data literacy, given that that's my baby there. And but I've got that book number 2 comes out in August 3rd, I believe, internationally, and August 30th in the US. So that one's called Be Data Driven. So that book will be out in August. And yeah, so connect with me, find me on LinkedIn. And then if you ever want to just chat, just reach out to me.
Yeah, cool. And I know some of the stories I read you writing about on LinkedIn are related to those awards or those medals behind your head there. So I'll let people try and figure out that connection. Jordan, thank you so much for your time. And Marie, it's been a fantastic sharing the session with you. Fantastic questions. Also, just like to thank the Digital Transformation Lab. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you both. It was a pleasure.
Yes, it was.